Reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. I'm going to be joined by a special guest, Mark Kiser. Mark represents an organization called Missouri for Christ. And we're going to have him join us a little bit later this morning and discuss the program and his direction and focus to restore Missouri to a moral and ethical state. This morning, before we are joined with Mark, I want to review a couple of issues that are currently in the news, because it's important that we understand the implications of what's happening around us. There are a couple of stories which I've pasted up on our Facebook page and our standard web page on the news links. And basically they are in reference to a number of initiatives from the Obama administration, not the least of which is that there is a $3 million retirement cap that has been put in Obama's budget. Unfortunately, it won't apply to him. Furthermore, there are a number of other recent initiatives, as in the fact that the federal government has the benefit of being able to exempt themselves from Obamacare. Now, Congress and all their aides and all of their staffs and all of their assistants are currently pushing through a waiver that would allow them to be spared from Obamacare and any resultant inclusion in that program. And then on top of that, the FAA has announced that they're going to avoid sequester impacts around the Washington, D.C. airports. What this should smell like to an ordinary American is hypocrisy. We see it every day in every facet of every move by this government. We see it where they give themselves special privileges. I bring to your attention the recent ramrod speed with which the Congress passed and the President signed a waiver to allow them to continue to do insider trading, which had been blocked after many, many years of abuse by our senators. So what we have here is a group of elitists who pass laws that benefit themselves, exempt themselves from the onerous implications of those which are national in their scope, while simultaneously forcing the rest of us to live under the regime and the totalitarianism that they're issuing forth. Ladies and gentlemen, what that tells you, what that should be speaking to you, is that we are no longer in a position where our government represents us. Ergo, I have provided an outlet and a solution to that problem. It's called 90 Days to Change the World. And 90 Days That Will Change the World was designed and geared to accomplish the goal of essentially starving this beast out and then removing these individuals from governmental positions where they can continue to deploy an elitist mentality that applies only to us but never to them. Millions and millions of travelers are being held up under a sequester that, quite frankly, is absolutely unnecessary and that is harmful and dangerous to the traveling public. Obamacare is being fostered upon the rest of us, and yet Congress exempts themselves and their staff and their aides and all of their families and all of the unions that supported them from the onerous implications. How far and how much longer can we allow this to go on? I urge you to seriously consider, and if you agree with the principles therein, spread the word. Not just to friends and family, but I went off last night or yesterday morning in reference to the fact that there are literally dozens of conservative talk radio hosts out there who constantly bring issues to our attention, but never, ever provide a solution. This, on the other hand, offers a solution, albeit a drastic one. But, folks, drastic situations call for drastic measures. We are at a point where our nation is slipping from our hands. We are at a point where our republic is being lost like sand through our fingers. The race is on. The question is, will we become organized as a nation, as voters, fast enough to prevent their plan from going into action, which is ultimately your total enslavement? Total enslavement under debt, total enslavement under onerous rules and regulations and oppression, the ability to take money from you at will and expend it on their banksters and friends and cronies, misuse of the public trust, misuse of the public funds, malfeasance in office. There's so much going on right now with this terrorist bombing in Boston. We don't know where the culprits are. I can tell you this. There's no doubt in my mind that these two guys didn't act alone. And the DHS that we've spent over $1 trillion on utterly failed. I posted up a link this morning by a congressman who says that in the 10 years since 9/11 that Bush served, not a single terrorist attack got through. In the 6 years since Obama's been in office, 5 have gotten through. Because he stripped that agency of its effectiveness, and he's broken down the barriers, or built up barriers, perhaps is a better analogy, between those organizations actively functioning in the role in which they're intended. All of this designed and geared to accomplish one thing: the ultimate destruction of the Republic of the United States of America from within, from on high. Folks, that's the grounds of high crimes, misdemeanors, also known as treason. If you willfully, willingly, wantonly work towards destroying the fabric and the republic that is our government, you give me a better word for it and I'll be happy to use it. But I can't find one. I cannot find a better word to describe what is happening in the United States of America. Not just in this administration, but both parties in Congress, the Republicans and the Democrats. They have betrayed us. They have sold us down the river. They have enlarged their own personal sphere of influence. They have enlarged their coffers. They have enlarged their personal treasuries. They have usurped power. And now we are left with the results. So I ask you, America, what are you going to do in an effort to try to restore the liberty that we know, cherish, and believe in? The task is now down to you. Where do you stand? After this break, we're going to be joined by Mark Kiser of Missouri for Christ. He will be discussing with us the program and the intent of trying to restore Missouri to a moral fabric and a code of morality that has been given to us in writing and in teachings for thousands of years. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the real reason why our country's falling apart. We don't have leaders with integrity, honor, or honesty. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
If you're looking for a new or used pistol, shotgun, or rifle, West Plains Pawn & Gun has over 450 firearms in stock. All your favorite models like Beretta, Glock, Smith & Wesson, Kimber, and many, many more. West Plains Pawn & Gun is also a Class 3 arms dealer, so if they don't have it on the shelf, West Plains Pawn & Gun can order it for you. Even those hard-to-get guns. West Plains Pawn & Gun, 1713 U.S. Highway 160 West in West Plains, or online at westplainspawn.com.
Hi, it's Hugh Hewitt on the next Hugh Hewitt Show. The Republican National Committee is in Los Angeles, and I'm talking to them following my show on whether or not the Republican National Committee actually has a clue on what they're doing. I think they do. They've got to come to Cleveland. I'll tell you why on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Sundays from 6 till 7, following Money Talk with Bob Brinker, it's the Weekend Journal with Hugh Hewitt on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
All right, we're back. This is America's Voice Now. We are joined this morning by Mark Kiser. Mark is a pastor and the founder and one of the primary leaders of the group called Missouri for Christ. And Mark, I met you at the Ozarks Freedom Festival and down in Koshkonong, and it was a valuable meeting, I felt. I'd like to introduce you to our audience and allow you to have an opportunity to kind of give them an overview of your program and essentially what your thoughts and impressions are on the current situation of where we stand and where we have fallen away from biblical and spiritual principles of honesty, morality, integrity.
Yeah. Well, Mike, first of all, thank you. And it was a blessing to meet you Saturday. When I was standing there listening to you speak, I guess God must have been moving because I really didn't have to say anything because you basically said everything when you were speaking. I just stood there and smiled and enjoyed it. But one of the
sorry,
things,
I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No. Hey, that's fine. I actually enjoyed it. But one of the things that you brought up in your speech was you were talking about when the shot was heard around the world. You were talking about Pastor Jonas Clark.
Yes, sir.
And I bring that up because I believe the key is bringing pastors back to be the men of God they're supposed to be. In other words, they're supposed to be called by God, not choosing that position. And that night that Paul Revere made his ride, Sam Adams and John Hancock were staying at Pastor Jonas Clark's house. And I've got to go to Lexington and see where all this happened. And I tell you, it's life-changing. Because one of them, when they heard that the British were coming, said, will your men fight? They asked the pastor. Everybody, your listeners have got to get this. They asked the pastor, will your men fight?
Yeah.
And Pastor Jonas Clark's reply it gives me goosebumps. His reply was, he goes, that's what I trained them for.
Bingo. And here.
And so, every one of those 77 men were members of his church.
Right. Not only did he encourage them to go out there and defend what he knew to be a violation of liberty, but he led them and he actually stood on the field with them.
Yes. And the last statement he made right before they went out, he said, my men are willing to die even underneath the shadow of the house of God. And when I heard that for the first time, it really was life-changing to me because that's it. That is the whole key is getting these, I hate to say, really, we have a country full of wimpy pastors that will not speak up on the truth. And I'll tell you, Mike, I was a full-time pastor up until 2007, and God just got a hold of me, and now I travel through the state of Missouri, through the United States, really shouting the clarion call, kind of like what you're doing on your radio program, and telling the people, look, it's time to sit back in our pews is over with. The time to beat to action, to go out to the battlefield, is now. The battle has. The shots have already been fired, and we need, in my opinion, through Reclaiming Missouri for Christ, we need men of God to stand up and be men of God.
You know, we're not a religious program; we're a political program, and we're a political activist program. And yet, I feel like most Americans feel like they're alone because and outside of the religious purview of this, because most churches are unwilling to speak to their people and shepherd their flock, if you'll forgive a couple of, coined analogies. They're not protecting their flock because they're hiding via omission the truth, which is that we as a nation are in decline. And we are no longer at the point where we're walking or pacing ourselves or even trotting or a full-out run towards the finish line of totalitarianism. We've actually gone off the edge of the cliff and we're in total freefall. And I believe that churches have an obligation to educate their and I was going to say constituents, but congregation is the right word, although constituents works too.
Right.
And yet they are failing to do that. And I think one of the reasons why they're failing, and perhaps we can get into this in the next segment, is that they have bought into this Kool-Aid drama of separation of church and state, and in a lot of instances they've accepted the 501c3 designation, which says to them, if you talk about politics from behind your pulpit, we can yank your tax-exempt status. And I feel, personally, that one of the reasons that churches have allowed their sheep to be infiltrated with wolves and are refusing to alert the sheep of the presence of the wolves is they're afraid that they're going to lose their tax-exempt status.
100% correct. Especially in Springfield, where we're fighting a sexual orientation, gender identity ordinance that's been clearly said that if we get it in Springfield, it opens the floodgates to every city around the Bible Belt.
Tell me about this initiative. What is it? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, around the country, they're trying to add sexual orientation and gender identity, including transvestites, to the anti-discrimination ordinance.
Oh, okay, right.
Basically,
so
which would open the floodgates. Status. Yeah, which would open the floodgates to transvestites using public restrooms, or they could use male, female, whatever, whatever they felt like that day.
Right.
Well, when I would go to the pastors here in Springfield, their answer was, well, we do not get involved in political issues. Of course, then you
just proved my point.
Right. and because they would, we can't do that, we would get in trouble. We're just about, that is the gospel. And a true shepherd, you brought it up, the true shepherd will always and will lay down his life for his flock. And what we're seeing these shepherds, they're not true shepherds, because they're not willing to risk anything for their flock.
Well, my concern with this is real simple. If you're going to shield your flock from the truth, then you have no business in the role of shepherd. I mean, if a shepherd who would allow the wolves to encircle the flock and not stand up to fight and defend them should perhaps go be a storekeeper or something. I mean, the simple reality is this: if you're willing to allow your congregation to be misled because of your political correctness or your fear to expose the elephant that's standing on our feet that, quite honestly, everybody already knows is there, I have no sympathy nor any further discussion to be had with that individual, regardless of how well they may couch themselves as a pillar of the community.
Okay, that's amen to that. I couldn't have said it better.
I'm appalled by the number of churches that are unwilling to stand up and do what's right in the face of such extreme tyranny as we see. And I study this stuff every day. I see it every day. Every day there is another move, another giant leap forward in the progression of tyranny in the United States of America. And over and over and over again, it appears that our churches are willing to allow that to go by the board, as long as nothing touches their personal protected status. And that's incomprehensible to me.
Well, Mike, we know, and I know you know this because I could just tell from talking to you just a little bit on Saturday, it was those pastors that they called, that the British called the Black Robe Regiment. And it was those pastors that led in not only in spiritual things. Sure, they taught their congregation the Bible, and yes, that's what I believe in, but they also taught their congregation how to physically fight and how to stand up against what you've already mentioned, being a tyrannical government.
Right.
And if you know, there's a big rock on the Lexington Green from Captain Parker. And Captain Parker's words were this: he goes, "Do not shoot unless fired upon, but if they mean to have war, let it happen right here." You know, and this was 77 men facing down 800 of the greatest military at the time.
Right.
And I think that's what you're calling for, kind of the exact same thing, is just if the pastors would stand up and tell people what's going on with Homeland Security. The pastor would stand up and say, hey, they're killing 3,500 babies a day through abortion, or, hey, they're buying all the state munitions, or whatever. You know, you could name so many things. At least the people would be educated, because they're not going to get it on the regular
mainstream media. You know,
no.
And honestly, I mean, I don't know how many churches are talking about, you know, this Gosnell trial in Philadelphia as an example. But if they are not shouting from the rooftops to their congregation that the murder of babies born alive is wrong, and they're being silent on that because the mainstream media isn't talking about it, then we have nothing further to discuss. To me, that whole, if they're not telling their congregation that the DHS is amassing weapons and armaments of war to utilize against the American people, if they're not telling their congregations that Congress is passing daily privileges for themselves, which we're not entitled to, that we are going to be saddled with Obamacare while they are waved away, that they have the ability to commit insider trading while you and your fellow congregants can go to prison for the exact same infraction. I have to say, that to me is a betrayal of everything which you've taken it, not just an oath of office, but an oath to God to declare. Yeah,
and every one of the things that you just mentioned, and 1,000 more that we can go on for the next 5 hours and talk about, they could come up and say, well, guys, those are political issues. No, they're not, because every one of them has a Bible verse or a set of passages that go with it that say this is how we're supposed to deal with it. I mean, when God called us sheep, that wasn't really a compliment. Sheep cannot take care of themselves. And so we need to have that information, but then once we get it, kind of like your plan, we need to have, what are we going to do about it? And that's through Reclaiming Missouri for Christ, is we don't sit back in our padded pews. We go on the attack, whether it's going to Planned Parenthood. I love standing up in Jeff City, hammering those guys. But the problem I see in Jeff City is it's almost like we try to, in my case, we try to hold the people in Jeff City to a higher moral standard than we do our people in the churches.
Well, I won't disagree with that one. I won't disagree with that one. But I have to tell you, whether you're accepting office as a minister or whether you're accepting office as a legislator, you have an obligation to accept a higher moral standard of conduct for yourself.
Right.
And otherwise, if you're not willing to do that, then you don't belong in running for that office. Because, so I don't disagree with the concept and the principle of what you're saying, because our legislators should be held to a higher standard. They are representatives, and therefore, as an individual who claims to represent the people, they have an obligation to do what is right and to be held to a higher standard, as do law enforcement officers, as do peace officers, as does the military. You know, when you step up and you say, I'm taking an oath and I'm making a declaration under this oath that I will do something specific, then you have an obligation to be held to that oath, and we have an obligation to hold them to that oath. So I don't disagree with the fact that we're asking our legislators to be held to a higher standard. I do find a problem with the fact that while our congregants and believers around the state are asking our legislators to be held to a higher oath, they're not also demanding the same of their leaders in the church. And I think that's your point.
That's really, I apologize, I didn't make myself clear, was we can yell and scream, well, hey, they're not telling us the truth. Well, in most cases, You asked a question earlier. I wonder how many pastors are talking about the Gosnell trial. Well, I used to be a professional gambler, and I'll tell you right now, I would be willing to bet that less than 0.5% of them are talking about it, because that could offend somebody.
Sure.
And what I meant by that is, well, our pastors aren't telling us the truth either.
We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk a little bit more with Mark. Hang on, folks. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. Sources tell Fox the FBI wanted more time to question the surviving Boston Marathon suspect.
Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was talking at the hospital in Boston, saying he was recently recruited by his brother, but after the judge showed up and he was Mirandized, Tsarnaev invoked his right to remain silent. And they also say, based on text messages sent, the mother knew her older son had been radicalized, willing to die for Islam.
Fox News Radio's Jeff Manasso. The worst traffic in the country? Still Los Angeles, according to one annual scorecard. Fox's Jessica Rosenthal's in L.A.
We sat in traffic here 59 hours last year. That's 9 more hours than the second-place finisher, Honolulu. The study links the increase in traffic to a better economy. The other places where it's a parking lot, San Francisco came in 3rd, Austin, Texas 4th, and New York 5th.
The survey from the traffic service company INRIX. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Thanks to Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop for sponsoring our phone lines. You can call our Wits End Classic Barbershop hotline, and you can get over there and get yourself a shave and a haircut. 2 bits. Well, a little bit more than 2 bits. Thanks to our friends over at Pizza Hut as well. On Porter Wagoner Boulevard, they have an outstanding lunch special, and on Tuesday nights, they have Kids Eat Free. Children under 12 eat for free. They're on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. Make sure you visit Pizza Hut. Our friends at the Battery Station, 303 Washington Avenue at batterystation.com. You can also reach them via telephone at 257-7799. Folks over at West Plains Pawn and Gun. Kenny's a friend of ours and a great supporter of our program. 417-256-3000, located about a mile and a half on Route 160 past Walmart. You can reach him also on the web at westplainspawn.com. Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. Half-mile east of Walmart at Route 62 in Mountain Home. You can find them on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com. And you can call them at 870-492-4030. My friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, the best damn bakery in 100 miles. She can be reached at 417-255-2253. You can also find her at number 2 Evans Arcade. Outstanding bakery. Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 2930116. Whether remodeling, building new, or doing some kind of custom construction, light commercial or farm work, Bill's the guy for you. 2930116.
Howell County Bank branch of Banketh there, locally owned and operated since 1900. It's not what they do, it's how they do it. What does that mean? Roger Lennon, president of Howell County Bank.
You know, when people come through the front door at our bank, they're going to be greeted by 2 or 3 people immediately before they hardly get in the door. And they're going to find a very, very warm environment and people that are enthusiastic about serving them.
At Howell County Bank, it truly is not what they do, but how they do it. Equal Housing Lender, member FDIC.
Weather sponsorships are now available on News Talk 107.1 The Point. Get more information, email info@diamondmediaradio.com for complete details.
From the Point Weather Center for this morning, we'll have areas of frost, otherwise sunny today, high 66, partly cloudy with a slight chance for a thunderstorm tonight, low 44. Tomorrow's going to be mostly cloudy with a few showers around, high 64. Mostly cloudy Saturday, chance for a shower, high 62. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi. For more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
Coast to Coast AM brings the Ozarks a whole new feel for radio. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point. Where else would you get callers talking about everything from UFOs to war trends, from mental energy to anomalies, and from lost knowledge to aliens? Listen to experts and researchers who are part of the guest list every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk. Don't miss Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. Midnight to 6 a.m. every night here on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point.
All right, we are returning. Thank you for sticking with us through this through the commercial break. This is a capitalist endeavor, as you can imagine. Money makes free radio work, and the way we accomplish that is by allowing you to get the benefit of our sponsors. By the way, please please make sure that you do work with our sponsors and that you patronize their establishments. These are the folks that keep this show on the air, and you can be thankful and grateful to them that they accomplished that task. Again, we're joined by Mark Kiser. Mark is the purveyor and the founder of Restoring Missouri for Christ. And Mark, before the break, we were talking about how churches have basically abandoned their mission statement in favor of political correctness and the benefit of the 501c3 designation from the IRS that basically they feel like, prohibits them from doing the church and state argument. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I totally agree. Because like I said, doing what I do since 2007, I've had more and more pastors tell me, well, Mark, I can't get involved in that because it's a political issue and I could lose my tax-exempt status. And, my first comment back to them is always very clear. I said, what does the First Amendment of the United States say? It says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise. If Congress cannot make a law, they can't make a law to tax it. I mean, that's pretty elementary. We learned that in high school.
Right.
And they just look at me with this blank look, and they're like, but yeah, it says this. And so, as I shared with you earlier, that quote from
Please read that. Please read that if you would, because I think that's a very, very valuable one. It's an insight into the thinking and the mind of not only the IRS and how they view this, but also why pastors are unwilling to do that which they have the right to do. I think they're using it as a convenient excuse. So go ahead and read that if you don't mind.
Oh, yes. This guy, his name is Steve Nestor, and he's a retired senior IRS revenue officer. He says this, I'm not the only IRS employee who's wondered why churches go to the government and seek permission to be exempt from a tax they didn't owe to begin with, and to seek a tax-deductible status that they've always had anyway. Many of us have marveled at how church leaders want to be regulated and controlled by an agency of government that most Americans have prayed would just get out of their lives. Churches are in an amazingly unique position, but they don't seem to know or appreciate the implications of what it would mean to be free of government control.
That is an amazing statement. I got to wonder if those churches, if a lot of them aren't operating in sheer ignorance. And then the second issue is I wonder if those who aren't operating in sheer ignorance are utilizing that as an excuse, a plausible deniability, if you will, from having to take a position and a stand which may be considered unpopular or may alienate some portion thereof of their congregation.
No, and actually this is kind of how we started this. And when I first started looking into 501c3, I was wholehearted. I said, man, if I just go share this truth with pastors, they'll get it. They'll get out of their tax-exempt status, they'll get out of RF, and it'll be great. And then I realized the key
they don't
is
want to hear the
truth.
Isn't it amazing that ministers who want to educate and inform others of the truth of the gospel are so willing to ignore the truth that is presented to them on another issue, and they'll be closed-minded to that. I have to tell you, I'm terribly frightened for our nation as a general whole, but especially the faith-based community organizations that exist in America, and I'll tell you why. There is FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is working with both community groups and faith-based organizations, and they're kicking off these drills that they run with them, and they're starting them out very, very innocuously. They're calling them like anti-fire drills, and it's called Be Ready Sunday. And what it says essentially is they're working with churches to explain to them how and what you should do in the event that there's a fire evacuation plan, so that in the event that there was ever a fire during a Sunday worship service, everybody would know what to do. Well, first of all, I'm not really sure that that's the government's role. Secondarily, what it is that it's the camel's nose under the tent, so to speak, in which these churches begin to rely upon FEMA for direction. And my greatest fear with that is that we have seen historically, it's like gun registration, right? It always leads to something greater and something more onerous. And my deepest concern here is that these Be Ready Sunday engagements of churches will essentially allow the FEMA to get involved in the church so that they have an easy tracking mechanism when this thing does come down, because one of the first things that we've ever seen under martial and totalitarianistic type approaches from government is that the first thing they do is they round up all the dissidents. And who are the strongest dissidents? Churches and political writers. And so, well, the political writers, that's a whole different argument, and we can have that discussion another day. But one of the best ways to round up political dissidents who are faith-based is to actually use the Facebook, if you will, of churches, right? Because everybody in the congregation is a potential target at that point. And now you have FEMA already deeply embedded in the church's organization and in the congregation, and they know exactly who's who. And boy, what a great way. I mean, if you're going to go fishing, right, you go fishing with a net where the fish are.
Sure. And how many times, I mean, I know I've heard him say it twice, but our own presidents talked about how it's okay to exercise your religion as long as you exercise it inside the four walls of your temple or your church or wherever you're at. But man, don't bring that stuff out into the public square. It's those that bring it out in the public square. The Truth Like You bring out or Reclaiming Missouri for Christ. That's the first people they're going to shut up. And you made a statement about relying on FEMA for direction. That's kind of like relying on the federal government or the IRS for direction. We're in a lot of trouble.
Well, I'll take it one step further. There's a Clergy Response Team created by FEMA that's designed to facilitate smoother transition from normal American life into a state of martial law or forced relocation. Paul Joseph Watson described the program called the Clergy Response Team. This is training pastors and other religious representatives to become secret police enforcers who teach their congregations to, quote, obey the government in preparation for a declaration of martial law, property or firearm seizures, and forced relocation. In March of this year, the pastor, who we'll refer to as Pastor Revere, was invited to attend a meeting at a local FEMA chapter which circulated around preparedness for a potential bioterror attack, a natural disaster, or a nationally declared emergency. FEMA directors told the pastors who attended it was their job to help implement FEMA and Homeland Security directives with their congregations in anticipation of these eventualities. So what they're doing is they're trying to enlist Pied Pipers of pastors who will sit there and blow the flute and get their entire congregations to follow them into the waiting arms of FEMA.
Mike, we already have pastors in the United States that tell their congregation and anybody that will listen that we're to obey government no matter what they tell us to do. We're to obey government no matter what, according to Romans 13. And I got to tell you, I know this isn't a religious program, but it does go hand in hand. People's got to realize that 2/3 of the New Testament was written from jail. Now, why was it written from jail? Because they were being biblically obedient, or as you could say, civil disobedience to what the government was telling them they couldn't do. And I already see pastors turning people in. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And
KSLA in Louisiana has an article out on their website called "Homeland Security Enlists Clergy to Quell Public Unrest If Martial Law Is Ever Declared," and they have this entire article broken down, and it's a fairly substantial story where they are expressing what's happening here is that FEMA and Homeland Security are enlisting pastors to basically betray their congregations into doing what Homeland Security dictates under these types of martial law and civil unrest scenarios. Hey, folks, let me tell you something. It's time for you, everybody who's listening to this, to start questioning your pastor about whether or not, one, they would be, one, if they're already involved in this, two, if they've gotten any contact from organizations like this, and three, understand what they're considering doing in the event of or in the way of compliance with this. And I'm going to tell you something. If your pastor turns around and says to you, "I agree with this," it's time for you to find another church.
Oh, buddy, I couldn't have said it. Mike, I couldn't have said it better. And it really kind of starts back with what we just talked about with the 501c3. If they find out that their church has a 501c3 and they take this truth to their pastor and their pastor doesn't want to do anything about it or feels that he can, time to find a new congregation. I mean, there's a lot of churches in the Ozarks. It's pretty easy to find one.
Exactly. You got at least 3 or 4 in every town. I don't care how small it is. You know,
well, you do.
You got a town of 600 people and there's 5 churches. I mean, you know, come on.
The government has made it very clear that once you receive a 501c3, that the state immediately becomes the senior partner in that church, and they put the law book on top of the Bible, and that now becomes the senior partner in that business, because it's not a church anymore; it's a business.
Exactly.
And that's how they're going to look at it.
Can I ask you to hold over one more break? I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you further about this on the other side of this break. Can you hang with us? All right, we'll be right back, folks. Hold on one second.
The further we reach out, the closer we all become. Hey, it's Nate Cooper here with the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point. I invite you to join us Sunday mornings. The program is a combination of local and national known speakers. So I encourage you to do 2 things. Listen in on Sunday mornings from 8 until noon and find out how you can become a sponsor of one of the programs. Just call our offices at 255-0427. Beyond the Point, Sundays on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
The area's best selection of firearms and ammunition can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry. Top-of-the-line handguns from Kimber, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Glock, Beretta, and many more. A wide selection of ammunition, including blanks, centerfire handgun and rifle, rimfire, a variety of shotgun shells, target, and turkey. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms and ammunition can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
It's a call and make your voice heard on the biggest issues making headlines today, or on absolutely anything in your head. Every call I get goes on the air totally unscreened. It's unpredictable and uncensored, and you'll never know what to expect. Anything can and will happen on the next Alan Combs Show.
And that's who you can catch every weeknight, 9 till midnight. The Alan Combs Show on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point, Monday through Friday.
We're made to look like we don't have a heart, that we don't care. Have courage and have faith and stand and do the right thing. Hopefully, the rest of the country will come around. But somebody has to say the hard thing. We have to do the right thing, even though it may be painful for all of us.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Weekdays from 2 to 5, it's Glenn Beck on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
So we're discussing the issue of this morning with Mark Kiser of Reclaiming Missouri for Christ, of the way in which churches are succumbing to governmental control. And the article that was out there in KSLA, which is a local news program down in Louisiana, basically states that this program, which is called Clergy, shucks, I forgot where I lost my spot there. Basically, what they're doing is these clergy response teams are expected to basically go to their congregations and say, the clergy team mission is, the primary thing that we say to anybody is, let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over. This is the language that these ministers are being taught. Clergy response teams would walk a tightrope during martial law between the demands of the government on the one side and the wishes of the public on the other. Quote, in a lot of cases, these clergy would already be known in the neighborhood in which they're helping to diffuse the situations. Wow. I mean, folks, if you want to, and by the way, for the clergy team, one of the biggest tools that they're given is that they will have help in calming the public down to obey the law, because the Bible says in Romans 13 that, because the government is established by the Lord, and that's what we believe in the Christian faith. That's what's stated in the scripture. I mean, let me tell you something. I don't think you could find a more diabolical father of all lies excuse than that one that was just laid out. This is Satan himself using the Bible for his advantage by convincing clergy that what they should be doing is diffusing a civil unrest situation when it's really an uprising to restore and preserve our republic.
Well, Mike, we started the show with the whole ordeal. I mean, it's the pastors. It's the hopefully a revival of the Black Robe Regiment. I mean, Peter Muhlenberg. I mean, he preached a great message from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and then he took off his clerical robe and he had on the uniform of a colonial soldier, and he went out and led, I think, a group of 200 or 300 people into one of the first battles of Concord. I mean, that's the type of revival that I think we need is behind the pulpit, and you get pastors stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go with what you say or FEMA says or anybody else. I'm going to follow what the dictates of the Bible says. And yes, I am a Christian, but I'm also a gun-carrying Christian, and you're not going to come and harm anybody in my congregation or in my house.
I want you folks out there who are listening to this show today to call your clergy or speak to your minister or your pastor,
yes,
whatever name you give him. And I want you to ask him if he has been approached by FEMA to be a part of the Clergy Response Team. Because if he or she has, and they have capitulated to that, then it is time for you to ask them some very hard questions. What is the training they're being given? How are they being indoctrinated? Because that's exactly what this is. Irrespective of whatever else you want to call it, your clergy, if they are participating in this Clergy Response Team program, are being enlisted to help override your deep concerns and to utilize their leadership as a leader of the flock and a shepherd. They're being manipulated to override your concerns, and these are the guys and girls that you're going to be looking to for guidance, your church leaders, to say, well, what do we do in a situation like this? And if they've been corrupted and usurped and they are now part of the Clergy Response Team, it's time for you to take a serious look and find out which direction you need to run away at a dead hot run.
And if you don't mind, can I add to that? If they find a pastor that's doing that, please let me know, because I would like to expose that pastor for being a traitor.
Well, one way you can find out more about Mark is by going to blackroberegiment.ning.com. That's blackroberegiment.ning.com. Make sure that you have an opportunity to visit that website. It's called the Black Robe Regiment, Awakening the Christian Community. And I'll tell you what, it's loaded with a lot of information. This is kind of like almost looks like a Facebook thing, right, for clergy. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
There you go, folks. So is it only open to clergy?
No, it's really clergy, lay people, because if the pastor's not going to do it, because what do we have at the Greens in Lexington? Those 77, a lot of them were elders and deacons and lay people in the church. We got to have them just as well. So if you're a believer in what this country was founded on, being Christian principles, not the Christian religion, but Christian principles, then you want to jump on and be part of it, because we need soldiers out in the battlefield, because like I said earlier, the first shot's already been fired.
I gotcha. You also have a website called MissouriForChrist.org. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
It's MissouriForChrist.org. Folks, you can find and get more information from Mark Kiser and his program. I especially like the Black Robe Regiment site because I think that, one, it's loaded up with all kinds of information on there, but also because it gives you an opportunity to interact with others who are of faith and or belief. And I think irrespective of whether you put yourself under one denomination or another, we have to remember one key fact here. First and foremost, we are all Americans. So you can take your dogma and you can take your religious particular, your particular segment of religion or sect and put it aside for a moment. Because I'm going to tell you this. Under a totalitarian regime, the first thing that goes is religious belief. And if we want to sit and toy with that and say, well, they're only going to go after those Methodists and not the Baptists, or they're only going to go after the Baptists and not those Lutherans, let me tell you something. You're making a dire and serious mistake. What they are going to do is they're going to go after any and every church organization. And our first and foremost goal should be to recognize, one, that we're all Americans, and two, if we don't have liberty, we don't have freedom of religion of any ilk. Whether that's Catholicism, whether that's Christianity, whether that's Judaism, whether that's Islamism, I don't care. Pick any ism you want. The simple thing is this. First and foremost, we're all Americans. And if the Constitution falls, all bets are off.
Amen. Hey, do I have just a second, Mike?
Please.
Okay. You know, and you started off with this isn't a religious show, and I appreciate that, but I also appreciate what you're doing. And what I would like to get across to everybody is, look, you know, let's just use you and I as an example. We're on the same team, and we're trying for the exact same goal. And once we're in the foxhole, I'm not going to ask you your theological ideas. If the enemy's coming, I'm just going to ask you, would you please shoot?
Right. Hey, you know, duck those bullets. And after you're done ducking those bullets, I got to ask you, do you believe in the pre-tribulation, the mid-tribulation, or the post-tribulation rapture?
Yeah, I mean, when it's all said and done and we've defeated the enemy, we'll go have a cup of coffee and we'll have that deep thought.
Right.
But we're under siege. We're under siege, and we got to be about the battle.
You're a mid-tribber? Get out of my foxhole. I mean, come on. All right. I get it. You know, I mean, right. The absurdity of all of that is just absolutely is correct. First and foremost, we're all Americans, right? And before we can do anything else, we have to make sure that we preserve the freedom of religion that exists in our nation and was a foundational principle. And you know, for all those people out there who call the founders deists and all of that nonsense, and they were slaveholders, how could they be Christians at the same time? And they weren't really that, they were Satan worshipers and deists. Don't buy the thing that they were Christians. And let me tell you something, that just goes to show the ignorance of those who have actually never read their words, because they were very, very clearly men of religion and men of God. Yeah. And they believed strongly in faith. Now, I'll grant you, they had multiple different faiths. Some of them were Methodists and Lutherans and, you know, whatever. But the simple truth is this. I don't care what doctrine you believe in. I only care about the fact that first and foremost, we're all Americans and we're a united army. And we have to make sure that we are standing shoulder to shoulder in the face of the danger that is coming upon us day in and day out. And Mark, that's what you're doing in your work every day, and I applaud you and I congratulate you for doing that.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be on here, Mike. Anytime you want me to come back, I'd love to, and I'm going to help get the word out about what you're doing already, send out some emails and stuff like that. And like I said, Saturday was a blessing to make a contact with you, man.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Folks, I'm going to thank you, Mark. I appreciate you having you on with us today. Thanks again.
Have a great day.
You too. Folks, you can find Mark's information at blackroberegiment.ning.com. That's blackroberegiment.ning.com. You can also find their website, which is a little under construction here, but it certainly has a lot of content on it as well. It's called MissouriForChrist.org. That's MissouriForChrist.org. He has a link there to the Black Robe Regiment, Proclamation for Morality, the advisory board. They've even got a section up there entitled The Plan of how to reclaim Missouri for Christ. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4, and on and on and on and on, all the way down to 5. Step 4, by the way, is activism. Very interesting. I'm grateful that Mark came on to join with us this morning and speak with us. You know, I attended over the weekend a rally at the Eagle Heights Independent Baptist Church here in West Plains, and had an opportunity to speak to that congregation Saturday morning after our Saturday show. And I have to tell you, I applaud what they have done. They have actually declared their independence and their willingness to, irrespective of IRS categories and all the rest of that, to make sure that they are doing the work that Jonas Clark did, which is, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to make sure that we are preserving our nation. First and foremost, we are warriors not only for Christ, but also for our country. And I applaud what they did. That Pastor Kelly over there is a true blue patriotic American, and I'm very, very grateful that they gave me an opportunity to meet with them. I have to tell you, there's not a lot of churches that will let me go in and speak because they're all running chicken. There's a lot to be thought of in that last statement. These churches are afraid to let their congregations know the truth. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a travesty. It's time for you to check out where your church stands and find out whether or not you should continue to go there or you should find an alternative. This is America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and this and every other show at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Doreen Hannes will be with us in the morning.
This is
KBMV Birch Tree is the Ozarks best news talk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.